Firstly, I would like to thank NI for giving me this opportunity to talk about bats. I think bats have been one of the neglected species. So I'll probably talk more from a journey perspective. How did I start about bat? What really interested me, and then what are the discoveries that I made? Trying to kind of identify or learn more about bats. So the talk is primarily going to be about more about bats and then the challenges that we face through, rather than technicalities. So first thing, when you talk about bat, what is that comes to your mind? For most Indians who live in the plains, so we always associate when you say bats, it's the flying fox, right? So the large Indian flying fox. So, but this is not just the only species of bats that's found in India. I think India has a much diverse variety of bat species, which almost accounts to about 10% of the bat population across the world, and almost about 36% of mammalian population in India. But many of us don't know about it. Even the naturalists, people like us who have been in the wildlife for a long time, hardly know much about bats. So my journey started about, the first photograph of bat I did was somewhere around 97, 98, but unfortunately I could not get any information about it when I tried to identify the species because there's not much literature. However, in 2011, when I was kind of digitizing all my slides, I chanced upon this one particular slide that I had shot about a bat, and then tried to kind of identify, okay, what is this bat? What species does it belong to? Then one question led to the other. Then I realized that there's not much information about bats. So that's how my journey about studying bats started. Other than Indian flying fox, then other bats that we basically associate is commonly what we see every day in the evening, short-nosed fruit bat. So this is the Indian flying fox, a close-up shot, mother and pup. And the short-nosed fruit bat, again, most of us would have seen this in an urban landscape, either feeding on a Singapore cherry tree or on a fig tree. Other than these two, I think there are a number of bats that we always miss out to. Bats are also pretty beautiful, so you just need to look through them. They are colorful again, they come in different colors. So again, the colors change during the breeding season. I think it's quite important for us to for most photographers to move away from the main larger mammals and then kind of dwell upon the lesser known species, not just probably bat, but also other species. I think bats is one of the key aspects where we neglected their role in the ecosystem. One of the questions that I keep hearing, even from the officers or from the other naturalists, seasoned naturalists, that they say, okay, why bats? What role do they play in the ecosystem? How are they important for us? That's something that we always miss to understand. But again, when you classify bats into two categories, fruit bats and insect bats, fruit bats helps in seed dispersal and then help in regeneration of forest. Similarly, insect bats are one of the best pest control. So they play a major role in kind of controlling the pest, whether it's agriculture crop or like the mosquitoes. So they play a very important role, but unfortunately we kind of try to miss that out. So where do you find these bats? Bats, again, depending on the species, they roost in multiple places. Caves are one of the prominent places where you can see them in millions. There are also other bats which are solitary or stay in small groups like a tree hole, like this rudimentaries. And then there are also bats which are pretty adaptable and then they stay in human habitation or like old temples or ruins. So this is a bat, black-bearded bat, which was photographed in one of the temples in Tamil Nadu. So they are quite adaptable. Primarily some of the species, but not all species. So you can find bats in ruins, old buildings, old temples, dilapidated buildings, or even forts. So there is a bat again photographed in Golconda. I was just trying to kind of take a different perspective from a ground up. So we always try to look at, now is, I think the latest trend is aerial view. So why not look bat from the bottom up? So you find bats in different places. I think it's just that we need to show interest to kind of learn and understand more about them. Other thing that I learned is when I started inquiring more about bat, it's very limited information I could gather. I started looking at books. First one was the Predators, Indian Mammals, then Vivek Mena's, again, field guide. Unfortunately, couldn't get much information about them. And everywhere I looked, any book, any literature, the only type of photograph I got was either this or this one. So most bats that were photographed were by researchers, scientists, and they were all handheld. Uh, we could hardly make out much of the features, and we could not really identify them through the natural habitat. So I think that was very depressing for me. So why, I was just started wondering, why can't bat be photographed in the natural environment? And what does it take to do that? So then I started talking to a lot of researchers, scientists, and they said, sorry, I can't identify this bat. You need to capture them and then bring the specimen to me. I said, sorry, I can't do that. I'm a naturalist. I'm totally against capturing bats. If it's required for a study, it's fine, but not to kind of just photograph and understand them. So is there a way that I could photograph bats and then not really by capturing it? Then I started learning that each species or each family has its own identification keys. So once I started learning those keys, then I said, okay, now I'm going to go back to the field, start photographing these bats in whatever perspective that you want so that you can help me identify those species. While I talk about that, I think this is again, just to give you a different perspective, one of the biggest challenge with bat photography is that about their roosting site. Unlike birds, it's very difficult to get an eye-level shot. Since they're always perching on overhead, it's very difficult to put yourself to the eye level unless they come down. So one of the advantages that I had is during my early college days, I used to run a Rajesh club, so I had a bit of training in terms of rock climbing. So wherever possible, the opportunities has been either chimney climbing or a rock climbing. So we use the technique to kind of try and reach out to a good eye level and then try and get a capture. Again, sometimes the long lens does help in getting those perspectives. So even capturing bat in eye level does add value in terms of identifying the species. So because that helps us in getting the required features that we want. So for example, this is one classic example. So there are two different species, look very similar. The only major difference is in the leaflets. Something what we call as leaflets next to the nose. So Cantus has only 2 leaflets, whereas Snyder's has 3 leaflets. So that's one of the major differences. So similarly, in the same family, there are other bats where there are no leaflets. So it's very confusing. So it's very important when you're documenting bats, when photographing them, you need to capture them in different perspective, different angle, so that we can identify the species. Another difference is basically on this length of this bone, I mean, what we call as metacarpal in scientific term. Again, different perspective, 2 different species of the same family, the greater false vampire and lesser false vampire. So this is length and the shape of the nose leaf determines the species, of course also the coloration. So that's the main key in terms of identifying bat. So this is something I learned when I interacted with the research and scientists that so we can still identify bat provided you take proper pictures. You take closer pictures so that it reveals all the features. Similarly, again, each species is different. Sometimes some species require you to have a picture of the tail, some which requires a close-up of the wing and the patterns. So that's critical in terms of photography pattern. Often I get a flying picture or a very hazy picture to kind of identify bat. Can you help me identify this species? But it's very difficult again unless you have a clear picture. Apart from photographing and then understanding, other aspect that I looked at and learned was using non-invasive methodology in terms of studying bat. You know, bats are always in a dark environment. They are nocturnal in nature. They always reside in cave. Using flash was something not ideal, but unfortunately you have to because absolutely no light. So you have to supplement with either a torchlight or a flashlight to kind of capture the bats. So I started experiment with infrared and then said, okay, why not use an infrared, shoot a video, set up the camera, then come back, study them behavior, what they're doing, whether they're grooming, whether they're interacting, fighting with each other, or when do they emerge from the cave, what time do they emerge from the cave, what does it lead to the emergence, is it the seasonal? So a lot of questions. I thought, okay, why not use a non-invasive methodology like infrared camera or a thermal camera? And during one of the recent study, I discovered infrared, though what I assume to be in, non-invasive, has its own impact. I just had 2 clips. One talking about the insect bat, the fruit bat. I think we will just take a look at it. So pay attention to the title because I don't have a narration. When I added an additional LED light along with infrared, bats got disturbed. So they stopped coming out of the cave. Initially, with just the infrared, they were comfortable. They were almost going close to the camera, but without hitting it. Because insectivorous bats use sonar, so they don't really depend on the eyesight, but they depend on their ultrasonic sound to kind of determine and then travel. But the moment you add a flashlight or any powerful light, they get distracted. But infrared has no impact on them, so they were pretty comfortable. However, the same study didn't result the same thing with a fruit bat. Let's see this video of the fruit bat. So fruit bats have a well-developed eyesight because they need to kind of identify fruits. So they don't really depend on the sonar, but they depend on their eyesight. So their eyes have very well adapted to night, and even the infrared is pretty distracting to them. So I started noticing the fruit bats would fly back or get agitated even when I was using infrared light, and not even a torch. So for human beings, we can't even see the infrared light. Only when you look through the light, you can see the red spots, but nothing else. However, the bats were completely disturbed even while using infrared light. So that's something that's very insightful and learning for me. I'm not sure if there's been any specific study similar to this which has been done broadly, but I think this is something that I first really learned about it. So while it's quite interesting and to study about bats and learning, it has its own challenges. I mean, I would say compared to photographing mammals in a jeep safari, I think this is quite challenging because there are multiple risk factors. So I think the first most important is lack of light, and which is like crucial. Dinesh mentioned that golden light or the divine light. Here we are completely dependent on ghostly light. So you have to be creative. I mean, without light, you need to try and photograph. It's not just photographing, you can supplement with a flash, but if you have to study sitting in a dark environment, it's very hard. You have to basically put yourself adapted to the atmosphere, let your eyes to get trained to, and then use a light, diffused light so that you can still see the bats and the behaviors. The second is accessibility. This was the most easiest because it's a subterranean cave and I could squeeze through. But there are many slits or what we call as chimneys in the rock climbing perspective. They were so narrow where I got stuck. This is a cave in the northern Western Ghats. It's one of the largest cave I've explored in the southern part of India. Can you see clothing here? It's quite different, right? So that's my friend Harsha wearing a complete like apron suit with a head cover for the breathing. So this is in a cave. Whatever you see in the ground, it's completely, it's called guano, technically in a bad term, but what we call as shit. So it's completely covered with bat feces. And again, one of the biggest challenges while you're studying bat, you're in a cave environment, you're showered with bat pee and poop. So you need to cover your head because they carry a lot of zoonotic viruses. It's quite dangerous, like rabies, Nipah. So most researchers, we all try and cover ourselves with using gloves and then complete body. And again, ticks. So quite a lot of other risk factors as well. And it's completely dark, you don't know much. Other biggest challenge has been the guano. So guano emits a lot of ammonia and then methane, other gases. So it's very difficult to stay inside a cave for a long period. One is the vision. When you come out, it's very difficult for you to adapt immediately. Secondly, guano, because the stench, you get nauseated. And then if you have migraine, I think it's doubles up. So it's quite challenging to kind of work in that kind of environment. So this is an image from a camera that we have set up for a time lapse. I think the camera was there on the cave floor for about 4 to 5 hours. And when we went back to pick it up, you can see the amount of ticks on the camera. There's a spider web as well on the next to the flash, a couple of cobwebs. So this is what happens, 4-5 hours. So imagine we spending a couple of hours inside the cave and come back. I used to spend almost a month scratching everywhere possible, sitting in my office, and then people used to ask me, what the hell are you doing? Have some decency. So but it's difficult to explain to everyone what really gone through. Other challenge is, this is again the same cave, a bit of an upper chamber. There's a huge difference in temperature. So most of the time, across season, the temperature varies. One point of time, there's 90% humidity, and there's a 10-degree temperature variance from outside to the upper chamber. We had very difficulty even photograph taking one picture. The moment you clean up the lens and then try and focus and click, it would defog. And by the time you look through the viewfinder, it's gone. It's already fogged again. And again, in that kind of environment, you're spreading through completely, dehydrating, and then it's very difficult. I mean, smell, you can't stay for longer period. I think the longest I stayed for 1.5 hours in this particular cave. Then I had to come out, or as I've said, probably I would have blacked out. So it's quite risky and dangerous. Other biggest challenge, life-threatening, snakes. We come across a number of snakes. This is a frame graph from an infrared shot. So we have seen crates, we have seen wolf snakes, which looks quite similar to crates, and many other snakes. Unfortunately, we have not been able to identify the exact species, but they are one of the major risks. So we also have come across a risk where, for example, if you're shooting sometime in like Ramnagar or Samandargarh or this hilly terrain, then sloth bears are another major risk, sloth bears and leopards. So we've been very trying to make out through the sound or any particular insight that we could get, and then kind of be careful about it. But can't help, you have to run through that. What are the threats for the bats? I mean, are they really in risk? What are the dangers that they have? They are, because I think one of the biggest threat is the legal risk. I mean, they have been classified as vermin as per the Wildlife Protection Act, and while that's not a big issue now, because even elephants are being classified as vermin and being shot, so there's not much hope for bats. However, I think the biggest threat for is habitat destruction. So this is a cave where I was identified at least about 5 species of bat. Unfortunately, it's under quarrying. I'm not sure how long this hill is going to survive, unless we see if there's a legal way to kind of put a stop. But this is not in a protected environment. It's quite away from a protected environment and a rural area. So it's going to be quite challenging. The other biggest challenge is hunting. So hunting is pretty rampant across India. Some places it's in a small scale. Some places it's very predominant and it's done in a large scale. We have worked in a project in Nagaland where they hunt these bats in large numbers every year. That's a community ritual. Similarly, I heard that a community in Kerala also does this hunting, harvest. What they call it is harvest every year. So with this, I end my talk. I hope it was interesting.